Do it live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another quickie of the Woodward Tigers podcast here at woodwardsports.com. I'm Rogelio Castillo. Alongside me is Chris Brown. And make sure to check out all the great content over at woodwardsports.com and our new partnership with Fox 2 Detroit. So if you are a fan of the morning show, for example, check those guys out. They will possibly be on there, standing with Braylon and Armani and Edwards. So some good things happening over at the network. So go to woodwardsports.com, participate in Woodward chat. We have a couple people in chat all the time that I get to talk to when I have an opportunity to chat. But this week has been like just a like I said, I had jury duty. Finally ended yesterday. We came to a verdict. The whole thing's been tension building, and with the weather and everything too. So it's been, but today is a crescendo of everything. Everything's coming to a crescendo as the Tigers have added they've made their 40-man roster complete. So this is who is now on the roster: Reese, Olson, Andre Lipsius. Yes. Look, let me be professional. Okay, let me explain this about Andre Lipsius. Okay, and it's one of those things where we've watched a lot of games. We've watched a lot of minor league games, and Andre Lipsius, since day one, I'm like, that guy's going to be on a roster. I was very steadfast about it. I've been very steady about it. And again, he's on the roster doesn't mean anything, but if you could be wrong, and you could be right and wrong about prospects. If you're wrong, you're wrong. It doesn't matter. It's not, I know why sometimes prospect writers have this thing where we're like, well, I sort of said that, but no, either you own it or you don't. But for Andre Lipsius, I'm just stoked for him. And then also Winslow Perez, Brandon White, and Parker Meadows have made the roster. So now you're asking yourself, all right, well, who is not on the roster anymore? So, Chris, do you want to go over the names of who is not on the roster?
Well, so the big one was Kyle Funkhauser. They removed him from the 40-man roster, which is a surprise. Not necessarily when you think about it more, but he didn't play at all this year, but he was an integral part of the bullpen in 2021. And that just kind of indicates probably the severity of whatever injury he was dealing with. We thought, it's a shoulder injury, I think. So we thought that maybe headed for a thoracic outlet surgery, maybe a labrum or something like that. You don't want to speculate too much, but that they've dropped him isn't a great sign. Then they also they cut the recently added Mike Papersky, the catcher, who they got from I think he played in San Francisco even this year, maybe Houston. And then you've got Brendan White, who we got to see his major league debut, and he got a hit. He only played, I think, 2 games, maybe 3 at the end of the season. He was a guy they added to their 40-man roster in the middle of last year. They claimed off waivers from the Angels. Then you got Sean Gunter was dropped from the 40-man, but he cleared waivers and is assigned to AAA. So that's helpful. And Miguel Diaz, who was one of the 2 kind of interesting relievers they added. Not just the 2, but they were one of a couple interesting relievers we saw in spring training last year, who eventually made it up to the big leagues along with Luis Castillo. And but relievers, kind of a dime a dozen, if you will. So they viewed him as a guy who was somewhat expendable. So those are the moves right there to make room for the 5 new players. It is slightly interesting that some of the players who made the cut, right? A lot of people were expecting one or both of the Castros to be gone, or Jeimer Candelario. I thought Zach Short and Cody Clemens were in danger of being released, but they made the cut. So this is far from the last move the Tigers are going to make this offseason. They'll probably still clear at least one spot for the Rule 5 draft when that comes around. But it was a very heavy day in terms of movement.
Yes, and the Tigers acquired a player by the name of Steele Walker from San Francisco in exchange for cash considerations. So what little do we know about Steele Walker, besides the name? I'm sorry, the name does count for Steele Walker. Just sounds like either a superhero's alter ego or a movie of sorts that involves an adult movie. Let's just say that. I'm sorry. Like, if you're gonna ignore that, then I don't know what to tell you. But it's not where my mind went originally. But I saw that, it was like Steele Walker. You have to Steele Walker. But he was originally drafted in the second round by the White Sox in 2016. He's 26 years old, and he actually is a left-handed bat. So we thought it would be Chris. I thought it was going to be a right-handed bat there, but he did get a cup of coffee with with this year. He was at the major league level, and he had just 14 at bats and batted a crisp 0.71. So, and that was with, I believe, the Giants.
Yeah, but he may have been with the Rangers. I don't remember exactly who he was.
Oh, it was the Rangers. It was the Rangers. You're right. I'm sorry. It was the Rangers.
And then he ended up, I don't know how he got from the Rangers to the Giants, but that may have been a case where, Scott Harris was involved with that and wanted to get a look at him, and then he couldn't because he moved organizations. So now he wants to get a look at him too. I remember Steele Walker from college because that was the 2018 draft, and I was paying heavy attention to that year's draft because the Tigers were the first overall pick. And Steele Walker was a guy who I would frequently mention and kind of here are the outfielders in this class. He was drafted 2 picks after Parker Meadows. So, and in between was Sean Hageli, who I got to use the headline Hageli on a roll, which made me feel good. Yeah, so I mean, that's an interesting, again, we've mentioned this multiple times now. You saw it with Persky. We saw it with Jermaine Palacios. We'll probably see it with Steele Walker. Scott Harris just likes to add players, and he has no problem getting rid of them if he thinks somebody else is better. So I wouldn't make too much of it. I wouldn't dig too deep into his stats unless he's up with the Tigers playing regular games. For now, he's just another guy on the roster. So
that makes
sense. Is he on the 40-man?
No, they just he was a minor league deal. So
okay. So they just added him. Yeah.
I personally like it because then it just makes our job easier to report, because then it's almost like in the case of Brandon Davis, which we have a gentleman by the name of Cleveland in our YouTube chat. And I agree with you. I thought Brandon Davis, well, I was a fan of his too, but it is what it is. But he was designated for assignment. I don't think he got enough time up here, but also, again, I was kind of a little miffed. Same thing with, like, for example, with Trace Thompson, the Tigers never seized an opportunity. The Tigers outfield was so depleted that I thought Thompson would get a call up, or at least Davis too, because Davis can play the outfield, but it never happened. And then everybody, and I'm not one of those people that say, I predicted that he was going to go to the Dodgers and do that. No one did. And no one did. So don't stop. Like, every time I saw a tweet about that this year, I'm like, he didn't do anything in his other stops. So what made it any different than it was before?
Yeah, so, I mean, the Padres released him before the Tigers last year. Sometimes players, like he's the definition of like a quad A player. And sometimes guys like that get a hot streak, and it probably helps to be batting like ninth in an elite Dodgers lineup. But yeah, I don't know. I like Brendan Davis too, but I don't think that there was a ton there. Like, he had some ability for sure, but yeah, I don't think that's going to be one that's going to come back to haunt them too much. I don't think any of these guys are really, and we said it before, even if they do, Harris is going to cycle through enough players to make it not matter. He'll find somebody who haunts a different team.
And that's and look, and quite frankly, it's going to take us a while for us not to get used to having people that the Tigers are in love with, or whatever the case is. It's stashed away by David Littlefield or Scott Chad or Chad. David Chad. I don't know why Scott Chad. I'm sorry, it's the whole Scott Harris thing. But the Tigers also made another big splash today as they hired four new coaches to the major league staff, as Ryan Eubanks is named the head athletic trainer. Also, Michael Bedar. Is it Bedar? Am I saying that correctly?
Berdar, I think.
Berdar. Keith Beauregard and James Rolson will be all hitting coaches, with James Rolson having the title of assistant hitting coach. And then Robert Lund, who we talked about last week, the assistant pitching coach. So that all occurred today. So as far as background goes, Bedar comes from San Diego. He was the hitting coach over there. He's also a U of M graduate in 2017. So that's fairly recent. He's a pretty young guy. And he played 2 seasons. Before that, he was at a junior college over at Diablo Valley in California. and he was picked essentially. You can read more in the press release, but Bogard spent time in the Dodgers, and it's interesting because we get a lot of West Coast flavor, with the exception of Olson, who has been with the Marlins. He was a bench coach, but before that, though, he was the hitting coach for the Twins before going to Miami. So this is a guy who orchestrated the 2019 offense of the Twins that, if you recall, had a major league record of 307 home runs. So I don't know what his role is in that, but either way, he has been around for a while, and that's another veteran to add there. And so as Eubanks goes, and Chris, you want to tell the story about Eubanks with some of the research you were doing beforehand?
Oh, well, I mean, there are a couple of things. It's very difficult for us to have any idea, how good medical staff is. First of all, we're not doctors by any chance, or any stretch of the imagination. We don't know what these guys are doing, what makes them stand out from the rest. But I just decided to go over to the, I forget the gentleman's name, but there's a guy who keeps a very helpful Tommy John database. Looking at every pitcher.
That guy rules.
Every pitcher who in the minors and the majors, even in foreign leagues, who has undergone Tommy John surgery. And so I looked at the last 3 years, because that's how long Eubanks has been the assistant trainer with Arizona. And I don't, again, this is almost certainly just a correlation rather than a causation. But I looked at every team going back the last 3 years to see which team had the most and the fewest Tommy John surgeries. And Arizona has the second fewest at just 3. Colorado is the only team that has fewer. In the same time frame, the Tigers have had 9. The most common is 8, 9, 10. That seems like just about every team. So 3 is kind of unusually low. You would suspect, but again, it's probably just luck. But I don't know. Maybe that played into it. And also, maybe it doesn't matter much, because the number 2 is Cleveland with 18. They've had a lot in the last 3 years, and they're pretty good at developing pitching. So I who knows what's going on here? But if you want to, you could say, hey, that's a good sign that the Tigers are getting a trainer from an organization that somehow knows how to prevent arm injuries. It seems unlikely, but that's one tiny feather in his cap. That's basically the only research I was able to find there. So he's interesting. I do think, having 3 different hitting coaches. We've talked about this before, how the Giants had a billion different coaches, and we thought maybe the Tigers might add some, but I think it's a good idea, right? Like it with hitting, it might not hurt you to have, like 3 different voices, right? So it's nice to have everybody agreeing on the same thing, but not every approach works for every hitter. So if you've got 3 different guys with 3 different levels of experience, that's probably not bad. You can touch on Rosen, or however you pronounce his name, has extensive experience as a hitting coach, both in the minors and in the majors. Berdar, like you said, he's 28. It's hilarious. I was looking it up. He played against Brian Kreidler. He played against Brian. He's 3 months older than Josh Lester.
Jesus.
He played against Brian Kreidler, and he's their hitting coach. So that cracks me up. But so yeah, I mean, I don't know. We're still in that honeymoon phase, right? Where every hire seems great. Like, hey, this is a good move. This looks fun. I can see this working out. And we'll find out down the road. But at least all these moves make some sense, right? There's some backing behind them. And I don't know how much credit you can give Berdar for whatever the Padres. The Padres had a 98 WRC plus in 2021, and it was 102 in 2022. Does he get any credit for improving them slightly? I don't know. Who cares? But if he's a major league hitting coach at the age of 28, you have to believe that he's doing something right. So I think this is an exciting hire for the Tigers.
Yeah, by the way, somebody in the chat thought I was sleeping because I was looking down at my phone because I got a text. But
where's that guy on the left?
Yeah. Anyway, no, but it's the same thing with, like, do we give Olson credit for the Twins home run thing? So that it's a fair question, Chris. And the thing is, what I like about these hires too, it's especially I believe it's 2 more than they normally would have on staff, correct? So in terms of extra help,
I mean, they had Coolbaugh last year, and I think Hessman was their assistant hitting coach after a while. Does that sound right? Yeah, I think it's they've added 1 pitching coach and another hitting coach, I think, to what they had before. And I don't know, makes sense to me. And these coaches can do other things too, right? They're probably, helping with infield or outfield and stuff like that. So I don't know. It does feel like an area where you can get slightly better without really breaking the bank, right? So
Right. And
nice.
let's talk.
I'm happy with.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I just said I was happy with it.
And again, let's go back to the players for a moment because we really didn't discuss the
Yeah,
players that the Tigers added because so Parker Meadows had a breakthrough year. He totally 100%, even after he adjusted in Erie, hit very well. He was starting to hit off speed better. His toe tapping mechanism, some of the mechanics he changed, he was looking really, he looked better. And I think that one of the things that we always knew about that he had a speed to play defense. His defense was never in question. It was just a matter of him hitting consistently. And he started getting over 100 WRC plus both at West Michigan. He started off torching the ball at West Michigan. First month in Erie, he struggled, but then he just turned it on and hit with power and average. Same with Winfield Perez, who you and I have talked about this numerous times, how at West Michigan, he sometimes seemed like two different people. Like he would have a really, and we talked about this with Dan Hasty too, that for a month he would hit very well, hit consistently, and then he just drop off, and his defense would kind of have defensive lapses. Maybe it was through the head, kind of in between the heads, or heads, in between the ears. But it's one of those things where he started being consistent, and then I know the back is an issue, but let's talk about those two. I mean, Chris, in terms of Winfield Perez, this is a guy who has shown promise, and I'm just glad he got it together too. And to me, this is a really good addition.
yeah. I mean, both guys. I mean, they were the two big breakout prospects for the organization last year, and they have similar stories. They were both highly touted at one point, and they couldn't put it all together. And then last year, the big change seemed to be game power, right? Like, and Meadows was hitting for a higher average than usual. Same with Perez, but part of that I think may have been just dialing in the power more. You become more of a threat. You get hit better, but they both were interesting guys in that they didn't have like astronomical strikeout rates. They walked at a decent clip. They had some defensive value. I think Meadows' defensive value is much greater than Perez's. I think Perez is probably a second baseman only, possibly an outfielder down the road.
Right.
Um, and with Perez it was speed, and Meadows threatened the speed, and we thought he had raw power, but we never really saw it. And then this year they both just tapped into it. You wrote a great article about Perez, and you were citing data of he raised his fly ball rate, kept the line drive rate, was hitting for a lot more power. That was a huge step for him. And the same thing with Meadows. And Meadows, you touched on it. He moved from West Michigan very quickly to Double A area, and he struggled for 5-6 weeks. But from June 1st on, it was a 140 WRC plus, 40% better than the average hitter in Double A. And he was 22 the whole season. And then he went to the AFL, and it was kind of a similar story where he hit a home run in like his first plate appearance, and then he kind of struggled for a few weeks, and then down the stretch he got hot again. And I think that's just kind of the hitter he's going to be. It's going to take him a little while to adjust, but he's a guy that you protect because he's going to give you a certain amount of value just with his defense alone. I don't think he's like a future Gold Glove center fielder. I don't think he has the instincts of Riley Green, for example, but he's faster than Riley Green, and he just covers so much ground because he's so tall. He's got like giraffe strides. So I think this is a guy who could be an average player in the big leagues, largely on the strength of his defense in center field, and give you 15 home runs, 15 steals, maybe 20 in his prime. And so yeah, I mean that's an exciting player, and it was really a big development for them. And with Perez, I think it's a similar possibility, 15, 20 to go along with some. And he actually is faster or better base stealer than Meadows, I would say. So maybe I think in the piece I wrote for Woodward, I said he might be a viable replacement for Willie Castro soon. He walks more than Castro. That helps.
Yeah, and that's where, to me, I think he's a better, smarter player out there when it comes to even making decisions on the base paths. And kind of, he's he's gotten thicker. His legs, in terms of how he rotates and puts it in the swing a little bit. But I've always thought he makes good decisions on the base paths, and you can tell he's kind of a little junkie when it comes baseball junkie. It's just one of those guys it's always working on his craft a little bit. Not to say that Willie doesn't do that, but Willie, the thing is with Willie Castro is you put him on the outfield now, you're still if he's still on the roster after all this, do you start putting him in outfield again? Because in outfield he wasn't serviceable, but who knows? I don't know. Like again, his status is still yet to be determined because tomorrow or even tonight, for that matter, the Tigers could announce a trade. The Rays made like 3 trades, by the way, so the Rays have been pretty busy today. Yeah. And then the rest of the names. So Reese Olson, who set a Double-A record, the Erie record for most strikeouts in one season. Brendan White, reliever, who we were just talking about a little earlier, and Andre Lipsius. And Lipsius, again, really good numbers at Erie, got to call at Toledo, still had a really good walk rate. And from what we're told, too, has some hard hit contact percentages up there, too. And some of that data is not readily available, but we were told by people that it's up there. And so again, just a guy who doesn't, when you see him, you're just like, what am I missing here? But again, the tinkering of the swing, the steady defense, and really good eye at the plate.
Yeah, and managers love him. We've talked to multiple managers at the minor league level who really like Andre Lipsius, and that means something. I think there's such a thing as leadership on a team, and playing the right way, set an example. And I don't mean like in the Brian McCann way, right, where he's gonna judge you for tossing your bat. I mean, like, he's just a guy who puts in the work and he grinds out at bats. And I mean, the interesting thing with him is he played mostly third base last year. I think that's his best position. That's what he was drafted as. He has played a fair amount of third base. I don't know if that's viable at the big league level because his one weakness is that he's just kind of got heavy feet, right? He's not very quick or agile. He does have great instincts. He's got really good hands. He's got a strong arm. You could probably fake it at second base for a while. I don't think shortstop is an option for more than an emergency situation. And then when he's at third base, you go, okay, well, he's third baseman. He's probably going to hit 10 to 15 home runs, maybe 15 to 20 in his prime, but he's going to be like 30, 35, 40 doubles. That's he really hits the ball hard to the right center field gap a lot. And he's going to walk a lot, and he's probably going to play good to solid defense. And it just kind of reminds me of prime Jeimer Candelario, right? Where he's not a huge home run guy. He's going to hit you doubles. He's going to play solid defense. And there's nothing wrong with that if you can replace Candelario with a guy who's going to be like him for $7 million less, basically. But, yeah, I mean, I think there's a potential average big leaguer there.
Yeah, and we were told, too, that A.J. Hinch was asking questions about him, and it was because of his walk rate and having a good eye. So that definitely plays into that, too.
Do we have a caller?
No, it's just my phone. You know what? I got to put my phone on Do Not Disturb, apparently, because I put little behind the scenes garbage. Essentially, anything Apple product, all my Apple products ring at the same time. So my tablet's ringing in the other room, and I still haven't figured it out. I've turned off all notifications for it. But anyway, I just put my phone on.
I thought it was a step forward in the Woodward Tigers game where we're taking.
Oh no, we could take calls. Like there is a way to set up calls, but But I would agree with Rob there in the chat. The outfield of Meadows, Green, Meadows, it's very good, and I still think Badu does have some value to him. But again, I still think. What's up?
I remember they had Hill too. It was a very Sonic the Hedgehog outfield.
No,
but
he's a free agent.
No, he signed with the Nationals.
Oh, did he? Oh, I did not know that.
Okay. Well, not it was like a Steel Walker deal where I think he's got a minor league deal with a invite to camp.
Okay, gotcha.
Which we said Capitol Hill. We didn't.
Oh yeah.
You touched on Reese Olson and Brendan White, but I think that we should go into depth there a little bit
Definitely.
more.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts there? I'm kind of curious. White was a surprise to me.
White was a surprise to me. No, White was definitely a surprise to me. I said earlier that I thought maybe Reese Olson would not be, only because the only reason why I had my doubts is because the numbers are good and everything, and I know Trevor Huth is a big fan of him. But the reason why I pumped the brakes a little bit is because you have Ty Madden waiting in the wings, you have Dylan Smith, or they can use Olson to make him maybe they add him to make him tradable. I don't know, but I just thought I just think he's like a guy who's in a 4th or 5th starter. I don't think he's a number 1 starter. I think it's hard to develop pitching, let alone, I understand that. but I thought that if a team did pick him up, they would probably use him maybe out of the bullpen. I can see a team like that, maybe the Nationals or something like that, but because I mean, Nationals have no pitching, none. But as far as that goes, I'm glad they did, but um, when I saw him play, I think it's just because what we saw towards the end of the season. We watched a lot of Erie the last 2 months of the season, and one of the things that we noticed about Olson was kind of like the adjustments. He was in some cases he will make adjustments, and I agree with Cameron in chat. I think he's more better suited out of the bullpen. I just don't see him. You saw him fade after the 4th or 5th inning, and on the opposite of Wilmer Flores. The only reason why I bring this up is because heading into the season, Flores had some bullpen risk, but in a game against Somerset and there are a couple games down the stretch for Erie, going to second, third through the time through the lineup, I thought Flores did a really good job of adjusting and keeping his stuff good and keeping batters off balance. I didn't see that from Olson. So, to me, and Alan has a good question that kind of sets the tone for what we're talking about here. The biggest surprise does come with Brendan White. Brendan White, again, very good down the stretch for Erie. I think that he, out of all the pitchers in the Erie's bullpen this year, he was the most consistent. You saw that when Alvarez gave him the ball, it was when in a very clutch situation, and his stuff was nasty. He had a really good slider. And if you go to our YouTube channel on Tiger Minor League Reports, we have some Brendan White footage somewhere. The guy's good. But I think that maybe there's some teams out there that recognize that about him and they could store. But see, the thing is, I think his stuff is good enough to where he can stay on a Rule 5 roster for the year and just kind of stash him away and use them sparingly. So maybe that's what the Tigers thought too. But I was surprised. I really was surprised on that.
Yeah, with White, again, like the talent is there. We saw it last year. I mean, 2021 in West Michigan, where he was kind of pressed into starting duty down the stretch because they just needed more arms. But yeah, he was excellent out of the bullpen in Erie all year. I guess the main thing that made it somewhat shocking to me was, I mean, he's not really on any prospect lists, which is not a big deal, right? Prospect people don't always know what the hell they're talking about, but he's basically a 2-pitch pitcher. I don't remember seeing any kind of changeup from him. He probably has one, but I don't remember seeing it. And his velocity ticked up a little bit this year. He was like 92, 95, touch of 96, I think. But his main weapon is a really good slider. It's a slider with close to 3,000 RPM. You know, it's in that Jackson Jobe zone almost. And he pitched really well at the AA level. So it is kind of that game where you're like, do we like this guy? And would another team take him and be able to stash him on their team? And the answer for a guy like White is probably, because he would only be pitching 30 to 50 innings all year, maybe. It's kind of like a repeat of the Will Vest situation from a couple of years ago, where Will Vest was a interesting reliever. The Tigers didn't protect him, and the Mariners took him, and he looked good for them for a little bit. But then they eventually, they were better than they thought. They couldn't hold on to him anymore, and he came back to the Tigers. And I guess they just didn't want to take that chance this time with Brendan White. So, I mean, it wouldn't shock me at all if he's pitching in the majors next year. But it really is. It's interesting because now if you look at that 2019 draft, not only do you have the 19th rounder, Kerry Carpenter in the big leagues, you have a 27th rounder in Bo Brisky in the big leagues, and Brendan White was their 26th rounder. And that's to go along with Riley Green, their first rounder, Brian Kreitler, their fourth rounder, and Andre Lipsius, their third rounder. I mean, there's a chance that ends up one of their best drafts in the last 20 years or so. So it's
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, what were you saying?
I was gonna say somewhere David Chad and all of you are going, see,
yeah.
look,
we did.
You didn't give us enough opportunity. Look at us.
But and then just to double back on Reese Olson a little bit, I think you and I are in a agreement for the most part that he's got a good arm. I think it's probably a bullpen piece because he's kind of a confounding player because his numbers were outstanding aside from his ERA, which was probably the result of he gave up 15 home runs, I think. And that is because our buddy Jerry, who we write with over at Tigers Minor League Report, noticed this. He really goes full 100% effort on his fastball. Like he noticeably throws like more effort in his fastball, which is something hitters can probably pick up on. But it also means that I think it hampers his control a little bit, and that causes the fastball. It doesn't have a ton of movement, and it flattens out, and it gets hit hard. And if you can't control your fastball, it's tough to be a starter, right? I mean, he controls it. He throws plenty of strikes, but he doesn't put it where he needs to, and it doesn't have the natural movement to miss bats that much. So the changeup is really good. The slider shows well. So I think, yeah, I mean, I think there's something there. I've compared him kind of to Alex Lang as a guy who might be able to get by in the big league throwing 80, 90% off-speed pitches. The only difference is that Alex Lang has like his curveball and his changeup are both like 70 grade pitches, and I wouldn't put anything higher than a 60 on Olson's secondary offering. So I think a potential middle reliever. That said, you don't stop starting him. You keep starting him to see if it works, right? Like maybe he figures some things out. Maybe Fetter can figure some things out. And either way, that's one of Avila's best trades ever, getting him for Daniel Norris when Daniel Norris went and was terrible for the Brewers and didn't do anything and was back with the Tigers this year. So that's a good deal. No, we can discuss the guys who weren't added if you want to. That kind of
let's do that. Yeah.
No huge shocks, I wouldn't say, right? Like, was there anybody who you thought might be added that wasn't?
Not really. No, I mean, the curious case of Elvis Alvarado, whether he was eligible or not, because our good friend of the show, Eddie Bajak, there was nothing. Again, there was he was a free agent or not, but yeah, I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, neither was I. I mean, I wouldn't have. He knows the minutia of minor league roster stuff much better than I do, and we didn't see Elvis Alvarado in any of those free agent lists, so it seemed like he was eligible. And he's a guy who throws upper 90s and had really good numbers this year, but there's not much else there in terms of like secondary pitches. So not a huge shock there. There was the Sawyer Gibson Long, pitcher that they acquired from the Twins for Michael Fulmer. There's some thought like, hey, maybe you don't, you protect the guy you traded for, right? But but in Gibson Long is a solid arm, but it's not, not to be mean, but it's nothing particularly special. He's a sinker slider guy in the low 90s, usable changeup, throws plenty of strikes. I think a team might select him and throw him out there as a starter. I compared him maybe to like Brad Keller if you hit the lottery there and everything worked out. But for the most part, I think he's probably like a 7th or 8th starter who shows up in in July or August for a team that's desperately looking for arms. So not a huge surprise there. I'm trying to think who else. Adam Wolf we like, but it didn't seem likely that he would be added. Bryant Packard, again, not very likely.
Yeah.
Who am I missing? I feel like there's another hitter or two, but
there was I'll pull that up here in a second.
Jose De La Cruz, some people thought because he's on like top 30 list, but I just didn't think there was any way. He struck out like 40% of the time in low A last year.
Yeah, there was for that I wasn't worried about that either. But as far as look, the thing about Adam Wolf is, and I've talked about this at Tiger Minor Report. There was he made some changes, and he talked about that with us in Erie about so he went from a higher 3/4 angle and kind of went mid, and he started becoming a really effective pitcher for Erie down the stretch. There was a span, I believe, of 20 or 22 innings where he did not allow a single run, and he looked really good. And he also added some velocity on his fastball based off going out of a kind of a swingman role. When he stopped being a starter and started strictly going out of the bullpen, he became a better pitcher. And I think that even you saw, again, the way Alvarez used him in the bullpen was pretty masterful in the sense of that he was able to put him in situations that allowed him to show some of his best stuff. And that's unfortunate, but I think he'll survive it. I mean, I think that, but what also the reason why I don't think maybe is because he's a lefty, and lefties are, of course, lefties have, you've seen this before, guys that have that kind of funky arm angle stuff to it. You think of Clay Rapata as an example. I mean,
there's a throwback. Nice.
There's a throwback, but just
did they get him for Craig Monroe?
Yes, they did. But
hey, Rapata in.
there's I don't know, like lefties. Gio Arrieta, he got released, didn't he?
Arrieta did, yeah.
Yeah, he got released.
Though.
Maybe he retired. Did he retire, or maybe he got released?
I thought he was released in like.
He got released after, I think after a week we saw him remember we saw him in Erie or West Michigan, and then a week later he got released.
Yeah,
So,
I mean that happens toward the end of August, and the minor league system gets kind of ugly.
Then of course there's Mr. 300 himself, Johnny Valenti,
Yeah.
and again, as Greg, the voice of the year, will said, look, this guy is going to be on a major league roster someday. I believe that too. I really believe he's a guy that has a classic St. Louis Cardinal thing to him, like gritty infielder that's gonna be a pain in the ass. That's what I think he's gonna be. Also Andrew Navigato, who I thought had a pretty good year in Erie, being a utility guy. I wasn't surprised by that. And Dave Myers, yeah, and Dave Myers was, I think Lynn Henning said something about that too, that he had a possibility because he hit a lot of power. But again, I think here's the thing. I think with under the old regime, he might have made it, honestly. But under the new regime, there's just gonna be like, we'll find somebody else. Like somebody mentioned in Discord, and I gotta give props to Joey K on this and our Discord channel. By the way, if you're not a member of our Discord channel and you want to be, which is just Tiger Talk all the time, just 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We also have a minor league part of that too.
Certainly no foolishness in there.
No foolishness. No. It's not like Twitter. I don't want any dickheads in there. I created this Discord.
There's some foolishness, but yeah, there's not people being dicks.
Yeah. Austin Meadows is probably part of Breck, but if you want to be part of Discord, just let us know in our YouTube chat, and I'll send you. I'll be happy to send you the link on there to join it. But there was somebody that mentioned, and I didn't do too much of a deep dive on him, but I do like this guy. It was Malcolm Nunez, who was not protected for the Rule 5. He hit 262 between St. Louis and Pittsburgh last year as a first baseman. I kind of look, the Tigers are not going to get a first. I know that Harris has addressed that they would probably get a first baseman. So, but yeah, so I will, you know what? I will glad to wear Kyle 205. I will gladly put the invitation in there. I just got to make sure I'm doing it right. There we go. I got it in there. So, so join the Discord. It's a very cool thing that I started last year, because for people that want, Discord was something that I was using somewhere else for Prospects Live. And I thought it'd be a cool application for Tiger fans to come and hang out and talk baseball. And we also got Pistons chat in there now, a Wings chat. Somebody wanted a trading card thing. So there's cool memes.
I was just in there Piston chatting with myself last night.
But, I was wondering I was about to go to bed and I'm like,
First complaining.
Yeah, because no defense.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I think there will be a lot more movement now. There are a lot of guys who were not protected. There will be some interesting, prospects taken in the Rule 5. I don't know if the Tigers will get one of them, but yeah, there's going to be even more movement soon. And it wouldn't shock me. We did all this talk. It wouldn't shock me if we talked about before if Brendan White is just right off the 40 band in another couple of weeks, the way Scott Harris works. So, it's going to be fun to keep an eye on this team just at all times. But as I said before, don't make too much out of any one move, because the guys might not be here for long.
Yeah, so don't get attached to any player or anything. And there's certain, again, I will say there's more. I think there's been more activity on that side of things. And we saw all the names that are elected free agency. Kyra Montero, by the way, comes to mind, but I kind of saw that coming because this guy's been in organization since 2014.
He elected free agency?
Yeah, he did. He was part of.
Wow.
Let me pull that list up, because there's a list of that of guys that you may have known that were.
I would think he'd be a priority for them to re-sign, but
Gearsaw Moreno. Sorry, Gearsaw Moreno.
Oh,
sorry.
yeah, okay, yeah, because I didn't think Montero is a guy that is an interesting pitcher who I thought I didn't give him a big chance of being protected, but he's another dude who got some interesting stuff. So Gearsaw Moreno, that's not a huge surprise. Elvin Rodriguez left, right? It's just there's gonna be some pretty severe roster churn this next year or two.
Yeah, JT Hinson,
Shea Spitzbarth.
Yeah, that was another.
Who had a really he's got an interesting arm, really unique, kind of over the top arm angle with a splitter. But we always talk about like you can be dominant in Double-A and be one of the 2,000 best baseball players on the planet, but baseball's tough, man. You got to be top 750.
Yeah.
And that's just unfortunate.
No, and the thing is too, one of the things that it was, by the way, to answer Alan's question, I'm sorry, Alan asked a really good question about whether Jace Young and Peyton Graham will be a part of the future. It looks pretty good. I mean, we did see some of the advanced data about that. Graham hits the ball extremely hard. So
Graham
that,
does?
yeah,
Or Young?
or I'm sorry, Young. I'm sorry, Young. Was it Young that we saw that data for?
I
I'm
don't
pretty
remember.
sure.
I thought it was Young, but I mean, he hit the ball quite well in college. I was not impressed with his pro debut, but I also wasn't impressed with Isaac Pacheco's pro debut, and in that he changed my mind very quickly. So I'm giving Jace Young time, but I don't have him right now. I'm not penciling him in as like a future impact player for the Tigers. Peyton Graham is a huge boomer bust guy. He kind of reminds me of Gage Workman. Like he could be an absolute monster, like 2020 shortstop, or he could hit 210 at Double A. I don't know.
Yeah, as far as that goes, though, I mean, the thing that even a guy like Danny Serretti, look, Danny Serretti,
Danny, it's already.
Danny Serretti,
Danny's ready for the next level, huh?
like, yeah, no one saw that coming, and he was effective in Double A. I mean, he was, and it wasn't like he was just bloop singles. He was hitting all fields with power, and I expect, and what Kyle said in there, he was already good defensively. We already knew that Serretti was a pretty good defensive player. Young is gonna come. He's gonna get there in time. I think that some of the way he has like we noticed how at West Michigan, I think it was a game against Lansing, his debut, how he was positioned, like the way he was positioned. I think he was more shaded towards center a little bit, but there's a play that he made that should have been routine, but it made it look harder than what it was. Remember that one play going to his left? I believe it was.
I kind of compared him to Cody Clemens in that way, where he's a gamer. He's going to make plays, but he is not a plus athlete. Like he was pushing, like it was 20 grade run times to first. And we know he had a hip injury last year, so there may have been some lingering issues with that. Maybe he's a little bit faster than that, but yeah, I don't look at him as like a real value offensively, but he'll make the plays if they're there. I mean, he's a baseball guy. Yeah, what you need from Jace Young is for him to hit and hit for power, and we didn't see much of that this year. But again, jumping from college to high A is not all that easy. So we'll keep an eye on him next year. And we like we say with our prospect rankings, like it's just a snapshot in time. He could go be on fire for 2 months and he'd be in like top 3 in our system.
Speaking
in
of
our rankings of the system,
I was gonna say that, like, speaking of our top prospects, top 25 prospects, if you are a fan of Woodward Tigers, and you may or may not know this about us, we also host the Tiger Minor Report. You can find it at tigermlreport.com. I'll put that in there right now. So if you are, Jack, look, bottom line, we're working on it. Jack, trust me, we're working on it. Okay, I'm going over his house this weekend because if I have a setup, I made that setup for him, but I take responsibility for figuring out. I got to figure it out. So trust me, Jack, we are working on it.
Yeah, I mean, that's my main issue. I don't like listening to our show because I don't like the way I sound, and that's a bummer for me.
Yeah. So, look, Jack, and one of the things I will say about our audience, I love how honest they are, and the feedback. Look, the bottom line is, if it wasn't for the feedback of the audience on our audio, I wouldn't have the mic I have now. I wouldn't have the Rodecaster Pro, thank you, pandemic, board that I saved up for. So trust me, it is one of the things that we're working on. So it's always a work in progress, which is why we have our Patreon. So patreon.com/Tiger Minor Report could help us with that. That goes a long way. I know you're probably thinking, well, Roger, you don't post a lot of links in there. That's just true. I don't, and I got to do a better job of that. But we post all that content over at Tiger Minor Report. So please check out our top 25. It's there. We're going to be doing individual reports, but as Warehouse said in 205, said in chat too, we'll get back to the conversation. He's absolutely right about Wilmer Flores, which is why I thought that Olson may not make the roster, because I think with Flores going, I think Flores has a good chance. Maybe they make the rotation. Outside chance. I'm not saying he's going to, with that development of Flores in Erie, it kind of makes me go, well, maybe they could protect somebody else other than Olson. So, but that's a good point.
So busy mid-November day for the Tigers.
Yes. And I like I said, I still think, I mean, as far as there's a pitcher and there's a couple names out there we've heard been floating around and all that, but yeah, we haven't heard anything yet. It's been really quiet. It's been really quiet on the side. Like I know that Tyler Anderson signed with the Angels, which the Angels needed pitching really bad, so I don't blame him for that whatsoever.
And I think that set the market for the kind of pool the Tigers are going to be swimming in. These kind of back-end rotation starters, 3 years, 10 and 15 million. I think those are the types of names we might see the Tigers connected to, your Taiwan Walkers, your Jameson Tyons, and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, maybe things will move now.
As far as bringing Jay, before we got here, look, I know people want Justin Verlander to come home. I do too. I'm not going to lie. However, I just don't think it's going to happen as of yet. I think there's more money to be made out there. I think there's playoff teams that will look for services. Although I did see something last week about what he said about the New York. I'm paraphrasing that. Pretty much, he basically said, "I'm never going to play." He's like, "The fans suck. They don't, they root for you, they boo for you," and he basically ripped New York a new one. So he's talking about the Yankees. He didn't say about the Mets. So the Met, I mean, Flushing, they're playing Flushing still, right? I believe.
Yeah, Queens. Well,
Queens,
I don't know if it's still in Flushing or where City Field is, but
yeah.
I mean, we talked about it before. If you're Justin Verlander, do you want to come back to Detroit and try to get them to 85 wins, or do you want to try to shoot for 300 wins and be the last pitcher ever to do it?
Yeah.
With the Dodgers or the Mets or the Braves or some team that's going to win 100 games next year and gives you a better chance to do that. I think that he's going to take a lot of money and he's going to go somewhere where they're going to win or threaten for a World Series, and that's not Detroit.
Yeah, and he's going to be a hired gun. I mean, look, if he wants to come here at 44 and he gets his 300 and then spends that one season underneath there, that's fine. But at the same time, I think the Tigers have way too much priorities right now to really go in. They have to address so many other things right now. They still have to address the back end of the rotation because they're not healthy there. They still have to get another outfielder with power. They didn't get power. Powers, to me, is number one. If you're going to put the top 3 priorities for this offseason, number 1 is power. You need a power bat. We said this last year. We talked about that they're going to need one. And no problem, Jack. Thank you for bringing that up. We honestly, Jack, really appreciate it. So thank you for listening, too. Yeah. Number 2, I still think in terms of another, like we just mentioned, starting pitching. And number 3, I really think also a first baseman. A first baseman, because, again, you're not going to put all that pressure on Spencer Torkelson. Torkelson could take another step up next year. I don't know. And somebody mentioned earlier, I think it was Alex in the chat, talking about potentially trading him. I don't know what this new front office thinks of him. However, I still think the Tigers need some sort of backup plan at first base. I really do. And those are, to me, the top 3 priorities that the Tigers should address this offseason. What about you, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I like all those. I think you nailed it. I think they need more pitching depth. We saw what happened last year when they were down to their 15th starter. They need power, absolutely. They need power from the outfield. They need power from the infield. They need power everywhere they can get it. And yeah, it would be nice to have a backup plan at first base, so you don't have to force if your prized prospect, who is now a young big leaguer, if he struggles to hit 200 again, if you want to. You can't just let him stay there forever and fail, right? You need to,
right.
At a certain point, you go, all right, well, it's not working. You got to go make some changes. And it would be nice to have a backup plan there. I wouldn't put, backup first baseman as a huge priority, but I think it's something that they should have there, even to just put a little pressure on Tork to perform. I'm sure he feels plenty of pressure, but they need to upgrade everywhere, and that's a key spot, I think.
Well, definitely. It's like I said, even and somebody brought stop it in YouTube. Every time I say stop it, I almost feel like I'm telling myself stop it. But stop it brought up a good point too. Another good contact bat. You're right. There a guy that can protect some protection than Riley Green in terms of so Riley Green can just demonstrate his power more. Who, by the way, speaking of Riley Green, he was named rookie Rookie Player of the Year by the Detroit Sports Media Association. Chris had a vote in that. I was supposed to vote, and I flat out forgot about it. So that's on me. But
Who would you have voted for?
Riley Green, no doubt.
Okay. Well, I accidentally voted twice for Riley Green, so we're good.
All right, well, sweet. Because
I didn't realize that my vote went through, and then I was like, and then I did it again, and the counter went up. I went, whoops.
Somebody I used to associate myself with said they voted for Cody Clemens, and I like just. I mean, it's it's like music's subjective. You have your favorite players. Same thing, baseball is subjective, except it's not, because baseball stats don't lie. So, for example,
somebody, but yeah, no, nothing about Cody Clemens last year was spectacular. It was fun watching him pitch in blowouts, but that got old pretty quickly.
It was funny, but speaking of music, and it kind of worked out well, is so somebody DM'd me about what show I went to go see last week, and I said I saw Steve Vai, who was in the Frank Zappa band, and so the guy goes, or the fan goes, "How come Chris has never heard of Steve Vai?" I go, "Dude, there's a lot of guys that I'll say," and Chris just goes, "Oh, okay, cool," and then he doesn't know who they are, but it's fine, and
yes, my music tastes are fairly narrow and but deep, as it were.
Yeah. Like, if you want to know,
if you want to talk about 80s hip hop from like 1988 to 2004, I will talk to you all day. Beyond that, I'm not great with music. I try sometimes. I've got some other strange outside interests, but I'm not great with classic rock or anything like that.
But I think our sense of humor and our love for obscure humor, man, like, if somebody who can quote Kids in the Hall as much as I can, it's fine by me. I mean,
I certainly appreciate Frank Zappa. I just didn't listen to him much.
And Clemens did do a good job on the mountain. And shout out to Cameron, who covered for me last week, who we're slowly putting into everything here. And thank you, Cameron. I know you're in the chat right now. I appreciate you coming in there. And Jack is right too. The winning culture needs to be established. And one of the things we talked about last year, we've always made fun of we've been doing this podcast now for 6 years under various different variations. One of the things that we've always talked about, how I don't like cliches, like just this whole, we need to like right now, winning's contagious and those things. And I always thought that was kind of nonsense, but I've changed my mind about it quite a bit, because things I saw I see, for example, West Michigan, and I saw Erie this year. I saw Gabe Alvarez was the man, and Gabe Alvarez did a really good job of capturing the locker room. Same players from the year before, pretty much almost the same players, completely different results. Same thing with Pena. Like Brian Pena is a player's manager, and he knows what to get out of that. And we saw for the first time in club history, all four teams finishing over 500. And to me, it is a winning culture. So, Jack, I completely like that culture. It might be to some people like, who cares to minor leaguers? It doesn't matter. But for Lakeland to have as many 19-year-olds as they did, to go over 500 in the Florida State League is not what it used to be. Trust me. But still, I thought that was really cool to see that. And by the way, Workout 205, LL Cool J, Fat Boy. I want to play some Fat Boys for people out there who have not heard of.
The Fat Boys are back.
Yeah.
Chubby Checker and the Fat Boys.
Yeah, Chubby Checker and the Fat Boys are doing Twist. God, that song is so bad.
Marky D, was it? There's a great Fat Boys skit from Square One Television where they're counting burgers.
Square One, yes. Oh man, that's a good.
That's what happens when you're 40 plus.
But yeah, that's a good one. The reference there. So yeah. Anyway.
I don't know. I mean, that wraps it up, right? I mean,
yeah. So we'll be back on Thursday, normal live show, of course, that will be on at 9:00 here at Woodward Tigers on our YouTube channel. Check out all the great content over at woodwardsports.com. There is I'm going to drop this article in here right now. And I'm going to drop that in there for everybody to check out. And there's also, I'm going to drop an article right now on some of the new hires and all that. So there's plenty of content all at your fingertips over at woodwardsports.com. And the podcast will be live on Thursday. So join us again. We'll be talking. Hopefully the Tigers maybe sign a free agent. Who knows? But actually, I think this week we're gonna go back in time a little bit. And we might have a guest too. We did this last year. We did this last year where we had we did like different teams. I thought it was a really good idea. We covered the 87 we covered various teams throughout the year. So we did the 86 Mets, we did that. So we might go back to that. And if you guys have any ideas for off-season content, by all means, we love to hear some ideas. If you guys want us to go like Scott Bentley does over at Locked On Tigers, where he breaks down certain players, by all means, we love that. And we were a big fan of Scotty. So anyways, folks, we'll see you Thursday. Have a good week, everybody.